What is up, Steeler fans, and welcome back to another Monday morning conversation right here on the Left Ride Podcast. You know me, Jeff Hartman, and joining me today for this Monday morning conversation is Mark Bergen of the Believe in Steelers podcast. What's up, Mark? How's it going?
Jeff, we are 2 weeks away, less than 2 weeks
Yeah.
away, coming off Master Sunday as well,
Yes.
till the NFL draft, and still a lot of question marks with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Can't wait to chop it up with you today.
Absolutely. And what I titled this podcast was What a Long, Strange Steelers Offseason It's Been. And that's a salute to Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead. If you don't know, you don't know. So go listen to the song Truckin' and you'll understand. But nonetheless, let's go back. Let's look back before we look forward. What an insane offseason. And let's look back at the 2023 season because I haven't spoken to you since the season ended. What was your thoughts on the way that season ended heading into the offseason?
Well, Mason Rudolph was your best quarterback in the
Yep.
2023 season. And I know it's 3 games to close out the regular season and the playoff game. I thought he played pretty well. He's going to make a little bit more than the league minimum now that he's no longer in Pittsburgh. But he was your best quarterback last year. So it's like, okay, Pittsburgh has to do something. What can Omar Khan and company do in the front office? They go get Russell Wilson and then the Kenny Pickett trade. And it's like, wait a second, who else is going to be quarterback? And then the Justin Fields sweepstakes, it turns out the Steelers weren't competing against anyone else. And let me say this too. If I was in the Bears front office and I saw the 412 area code pop up, I'm not answering the phone anymore.
No way. No way. But let's go back to the quarterback room because that's been the biggest source of upheaval so far this offseason in terms of the way the room looks now compared to what it looked like at the end of 2023. Did you foresee any possible way that the Steelers would have the 3 quarterbacks, Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett, on the roster and then none of them on the roster in 2024? Because I would openly say like there's no guarantee Mason would be back, but Mitch Trubisky was still under contract. Kenny Pickett on his rookie deal. Were you as shocked as I was when all these moves started to happen, starting with Mitch Trubisky getting released early in the offseason?
Well, Trubisky was under contract, but the Steelers were like dead to water after that Saturday night game against the Colts. And Mike Tomlin was looking square in the face at his first sub 500 season. And that's why when Mason Rudolph came in, look at the body language of the other Steelers players in those games. So then it's like, does Mason even want to stick around? Because you're going to have a new OC again. He's probably not going to get the chance to start just because I think he made the most of his opportunity at the end of the season. But I can't definitively tell you, Jeff, that like, oh, Mason Rudolph got a fair shot in Pittsburgh. Totally. Like he made the most of his opportunity at the end of the year and he got a better contract with a different team. So credit him there. I know Trubisky was under contract. I didn't see any way that the Steelers could bring him back given what you saw last season when you're paying a premium for him. He made $8 million last year. He was tied for like the 28th highest paid quarterback in the 2023 season. So if you're paying that premium for a backup quarterback, you got to get premium performance from said backup quarterback. But then to deal Kenny Pickett, the guy who went to Pitt, and I understand with Russell Wilson, a 9-time Pro Bowler, a Super Bowl champion, someone of his pedigree, a future Hall of Fame player, that he's not going to sit on the bench and hold a clipboard. At the same time, there had to have been something that shook out behind the scenes. And maybe there was more to at the end of the season when Mason Rudolph was starting over Pickett and they were saying, oh, no, it's Kenny Pickett's ankle when he was cleared and good to go. You're not going to pull Mason when he was the hot hand. But then again, it's like at some point, Jeff, like here's where I come down on all of this. With the style of football in the AFC North, the chances are you're going to need 2 quarterbacks at some point in the season. Let's look at this past season. Joe Burrow gets hurt. Deshaun Watson gets hurt. Kenny Pickett's been hurt the past 2 seasons. 2 seasons back before Lamar's second MVP, he was hurt. So you're going to need 2 quarterbacks. And I know that he's probably frustrated where it's like, it's Russell Wilson's job. If you were in Kenny Pickett's shoes, he would have gotten another chance to play at some point in time. And so now that Justin Fields is in the building, he's going to play at some point in the 2024 season. When? This is what we're going to be talking about between now and September. But I also come down with this. You are paying, from the Pittsburgh Steelers standpoint, you are paying Russell Wilson and Justin Fields less than $5 million for the 2024 season. They are less expensive contracts, and they're better football players than if you had brought back Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. I can talk myself into almost anything. And so there were times last year where I was like, maybe Kenny Pickett is going to be okay. Maybe he's going to be good. The eye test was different, but still I can talk myself into anything. And then I look at the current quarterback crop that the Steelers now have, and we can throw Kyle Allen in there if you want. It doesn't really matter. He's QB3. If you get to that point, you're in trouble anyways. But nonetheless, I look at, okay, so here from a ceiling perspective, my gosh, it's so much higher than what it was a year ago in terms of the quarterback room in general. Russell Wilson, Super Bowl winning quarterback, been to 2. Justin Fields was 11th overall draft pick, oozing with potential, but can he ever reach that potential? It kind of, in a vague way, reminds me of Dwayne Haskins, who had all the potential in the world, just was never able to live up to it. So I guess my question is, am I talking myself into this quarterback room? What's your take on these two guys, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, in 2024?
Well, here's the thing too, Jeff. If it doesn't pan out, they're only under contract for one
That's right.
season. So even if it doesn't, we get to do this all over again next offseason.
I
Now,
don't want to do it all over again
and
next offseason.
in an ideal world, one of the two plays at a very high
Yeah.
level and you're able to offer an extension. I don't think that the Steelers are going to pick up Fields' fifth-year option between now and May 2nd. So there's a reason he's not going to start with that conditional pick that goes back to the Bears, the 51% of the snaps, to where what would be a 6th-round pick then turns into a 4th-round pick. So you have that, but if Fields isn't on the field, he can't really prove his value out on an open market. Like, to me, it's amazing that Fields isn't going to be a starter. I'm not saying he's a top 10 guy. I'm not saying he's Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson. He's certainly an NFL starter. But if the Steelers don't play him, in a sense, they're also suppressing his value if they want to bring him back beyond 2024. I think there's more upside with Fields. I think it's no secret that Russell Wilson's best days are behind him at this point. I don't think he's the same quarterback as we saw 3 or 4 years ago. But I mean, the Steelers fans will simply point to the stat sheet and say, hey, 20 plus touchdown passes. That's more than Kenny Pickett's had the past 2 seasons combined. So
Yeah.
again, and going back to what you're saying, I'll steal your line, Jeff. Yeah, I can talk myself into it. But that's kind of where I'm at with both Wilson and Fields. I think Wilson will be the starter come week 1. See where you're at after 4 games. Where are you at after 8 games? Where are you at during the bye week? And then do you want to make that change? If Wilson's playing well, do you stick with him? How that shakes out is going to be fascinating to watch. But barring injury or just disastrous performance, I think Russell Wilson will be the starter come week 1.
Are you in the same mindset of me where I look at Justin Fields and his skill set and say, there's no way they don't at least have some packages for him, whether it's red zone. I mean, the guy's like a linebacker at the quarterback position. Like, they would be foolish. Arthur Smith, Mike Tomlin, the whole organization, if they were to say, we don't want Justin Fields to even see the field unless poor performance or injury dictates that he gets there. You agree with me, right?
Yeah, and I have a lot of friends and family back home in the Chicagoland area, Jeff. That's where I grew up. That I'll just put it as simple as this. We didn't hate watching Justin Fields play quarterback in the Chicagoland area. I'm telling you that right now, having seen a lot of bad quarterback play when it comes to Chicago Bears football. So, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, you want to keep him healthy in the event that Wilson doesn't perform or he gets hurt. And again, I go back to the physicality of the division. It's inevitable that at some point in time, your backup is likely to play in this division. That's not a secret at all. Look across the division the past 2 seasons. And this is why with Kenny Pickett, if he was throwing a fit behind the scenes, that's the reason why he's not in the Steelers uniform anymore. And I will point this out too. Remember, Kevin Colbert thought it was going to be his parting gift to the Pittsburgh Steelers to say, hey, here's your heir to Ben Roethlisberger and Kenny Pickett. And after 2 seasons, yes, I wanted to see what Pickett could do with a different offensive coordinator, but with the opportunities that he had, I don't know exactly what goes on behind closed doors, what goes on within the team organization, inside the walls of the Steelers organization, the stuff that's not public. But something had to have happened to say, oh, we're going to trade the draft pick, who again went to school at Pitt. That to me was like the most shocking thing, Jeff, because Be one thing if you traded your first round pick. I mean, the Niners did it with Trey Lance. If he's not the guy, credit Omar Khan to move off him before it's too late and to be overly loyal for no reason. But because he's the hometown kid, that to me made it even more surprising. Again, I wanted to see what he could do with the new OC. But again, I go back to this too. It's like on paper, and I hate to do it this way, right? But see what the value is of what they got back for Kenny Pickett. But then it's like, if I looked at like Madden ratings and we were drafting simply on Madden, I get that there's more to the quarterback position than this. Again, would you rather have Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, or would you rather have Pickett and Rudolph? The choice is the former every single time if you're thinking about this logically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that the quarterback position is not just the most important position in professional sports, in my opinion, but it's going to be the unbelievable focal point of this offseason, starting with minicamp, OTAs, and then bleeding into training camp. And so we'll see how that goes. But I do want to ask you about the other acquisitions the Steelers did make. Sometimes it kind of gets, when you have such a, I used the term upheaval earlier in the show, I'll use it again. Some of these moves can just kind of get brushed underneath the rug because it's not the quarterback. You didn't just completely replace your entire quarterback room. So what was your take on, let's start with Patrick Queen. That was the big name. That was the big name acquisition. And it was weird. It was weird, but I loved it. But once I saw him speak to the media in Pittsburgh, I was like, I'm in. I'm all in. Let's do this. What was your take on Patrick Queen?
This is a position that the Steelers have been trying to fill since Ryan Shazier's injury.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. We could go through all the names, and there have been some solid players. I actually liked what Pittsburgh had this past season with the 3 inside linebackers, but all of them battled injuries in Landon Roberts, Quan Alexander, and Cole Holcomb. But this is a position, I mean, you could go through Miles Jack and Devin Bush and Joe Schobert and Vince Williams at the end of his career as a solid veteran player. But I'm talking about like stud inside linebacker, the guy that handles communication, the guy that can chase down ball carriers, the guy that has swag, the physicality, controlling the front 7, getting your defenses set, everything that you need when it comes to the linebacker position. And traditionally what you think about linebacker when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh got its guy.
Yeah, they did. And I think that his athleticism is, everyone's kind of, it's funny how these narratives shift. You know, when Patrick Queen was set to be a free agent, when the Baltimore Ravens didn't pick up his 5th-year option, a lot of people said, well, he's a product of playing next to one of the best inside linebackers in the league in Roquan Smith. It's like, okay, well, you take the 2 pieces of that puzzle in terms of they don't pick up the option. And yes, he is playing against right next to Agent Zero, who's a pretty darn good football player. But at the same time, he's unbelievably athletic. I think people don't give him credit for his ability to run with potential pass catchers in coverage and also be able to play downhill. He's not the thumper that a Landon Roberts is, but it's a situation where I think he complements him very, very well. And then I still do have major concerns at that position. You bring up Cole Holcomb. No one knows whether he's going to be healthy enough to be ready for training camp, or if he's even going to be maybe he'll just be kind of a sliver of what he once was. And that was a gruesome knee injury. Do you think they'll still address the inside linebacker position this offseason?
Yeah, I think that's an area in the draft. And I look at your front 7 from the inside out. We love TJ Watt. We love Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig off the edge when he got his opportunities. We love all that. All of that is irrelevant if you don't have a stout interior. I'm talking A gap, B gap, center, guard, line of scrimmage game. And the fastest way from one point to another, from point A to point B, is a straight line. So you have to make sure that that's stout. And it's not just linebacker either, Jeff. It's Cam Hayward's in the final year of his deal, coming off a season where he battled injuries. What was it, 2 seasons ago where the Steelers led the league in sacks and then they were dead last in rushing yards allowed? That will catch up with you quickly if you try to play that style of football and rely solely on turning the football over, because there is some chance. Like, look, there's some things to turnover creation. A lot of it is luck and being in the right place at the right time. So I don't just look at it from the linebacker standpoint. I also look at it, what are you doing on the inside too, with Cam Hayward, who's going to be 35 this season, in his mid-30s, going into the final year of his deal too. A few other things I look at too, Jeff. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but like, Are you going to restructure Cam's deal? Is this going to be his last season in the NFL? Because I don't see him playing for another team. But on an open market, I love Cam Hayward. I love who he is, Walter Payton Man of the Year, what he's meant to this organization. On an open market, with what, like making $16 million this season, I don't think he would make nearly that amount of money if he were to be a free agent right now. It's just the reality of the situation. Yeah. And then I also look at it from two of what are you doing with the other linebacker? Because traditionally the Steelers play a 3-4, but with how the league's playing now, you're going to rely more on nickel and dime packages because it's spread it out. Let's throw the football. It's getting the shotgun, getting the ball to high flying wide receivers. So you've got to address those areas though. And with running the football, like again, TJ Watt almost becomes irrelevant without a player like Cam Hayward. So I hope people watch this full segment and don't misunderstand what I'm saying, but that is so important for the Steelers. Of even Cam Hayward this past season, when he's out on the field at 70% is better than this team without him. So I look at it like from the defensive tackles that you have and the two inside linebackers with how the Steelers run and operate their defense. The inside linebackers and the defensive tackles, to me, like I could talk to you about it till sundown. In all seriousness, it is of that much importance for how this defense operates.
Yeah. You said how the turnover game, which has been such a large part of the Steelers defense, is very much reliant on luck. And there is a good amount of luck when it comes to that. But it's also become unbelievably reliant on TJ Watt. Like you see what happens when he's not in the lineup. And so you would hope that they can get a couple other game wreckers. Maybe it is Patrick Queen, who actually does a great job blitzing from the interior. He's very good at that, very adept at that skill. They need to have someone else. This doesn't take away from TJ Watt. TJ Watt, as Mike Tomlin said, is from another planet. But the Steelers defense cannot be like, okay, TJ, let's go make a play for us because we need it. It's great when he can do that, but you can't rely on it. So I think that's a very good point. I do want to go to the other side of the ball on offense. And let's talk about, in my opinion, after the quarterback, the one glaring position that everyone's like, oh my gosh, what are they going to do? Not center. We'll get there yet, but I'm talking about wide receiver. You trade away Deontay Johnson to the Carolina Panthers for Dante Jackson and a pick swap. And you're left with George Pickens, really. And, you let Allen Robinson go. Yep. Miles Boykin signs with the New York Giants. And now all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, what are they going to do? Well, they bring in some players, Quez Watkins. Some might say Cordero Patterson could be a wide receiver. He's more of a running back, in my opinion, and a returner. This is a position which is odd. It's rare that the Steelers don't have a cupboard full of potential really good receivers. And I'll throw in Calvin Austin the third. I don't want to discredit him. What's your take on the wide receiver room?
Yeah, Van Jefferson as well. I think the Steelers are going to draft a receiver, I would guess, on day 2. And it's been like 20 years the last time the Steelers went back-to-back drafts without selecting a receiver. They didn't pick one last year. So, having said that, there's going to be a day 2 guy where we look back on this draft where it's like, how the heck was he not selected before someone drafted in the first round?
Yeah.
And I know that the top 3 with Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors out of LSU, and then Romo Dunze out of Washington, I think they'll all be fine players. But we're going to look back on this, whether it's A.D. Mitchell out of Texas, he can fly, Brian Thomas, Neighbors' teammate at LSU, Tez Walker out of North Carolina, Ladd McConkey out of Georgia, Pearsall out of Florida. Like, I could keep name dropping, but there's going to be someone on day 2 where we're like, how is he not a first round pick with what he can do? This is a loaded receiver class. This is a loaded class at offensive tackle as well. So that's traditionally a position that the Steelers draft and develop really, really well. And you could even say, oh, well, a few years ago, it didn't really exactly work out with Chase Claypool, who's still a free agent, as far as I understand. Well, when he was in a Steelers uniform, I don't know if there's magic to wearing the black and gold. 11 touchdowns as a rookie. He had a game where he had 4 touchdowns. Those 11 touchdowns tied a Steelers rookie record. And let's talk about all the great receivers that have come through this organization.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, though, is that George Pickens will need help. Pat Freiermuth's in a contract season. The Steelers are loaded at tight end. So the style of football that Arthur Smith's going to want to run, let's run multi-tight end sets, set up the play action, maybe only have 2, maybe 3 receivers on the field. But Pickens can be a number one. It's time to him to step up as an alpha. Even when Deontay Johnson was still on the roster before the trade with Carolina, you were saying Deontay Johnson or George Pickens, who do you want to give that money to? Again, go back to which guy would you rather pick? It's going to be George Pickens. He's a better player. He's a more talented player. Yeah. It's not to discredit the route running of Deontay Johnson, but they're going to need someone to complement him and win one-on-one matchups, because when teams put a safety over the top with George Pickens and you've got one-on-one matchups elsewhere, you've got to take advantage of those one-on-one matchups. It's going to be a rookie of some sort. I'm very excited to see who. Another guy, too. I mean, Keon Coleman out of Florida State. Everyone's going to point to what was a very slow 40 time at 4.6, and people get too mesmerized with that. Go look at that gauntlet drill when he has to run the width of the football field. He ran pretty much as fast as any receiver during that drill with the ball actually in his hands. So there's going to be someone that the Steelers identify that can complement and, again, win those one-on-ones when you want to bracket George Pickens. Who that is, I cannot wait to see. And I'll say this too. Yes, you have to address the starting center position. Right now, if I had to guess at 20, Pittsburgh would pick Jackson Powers Johnson. But if they don't think he has the value at number 20, could there be a receiver or a player at a different position that you go with in the first round, and then you draft a center in, say, round 2 or round 3? How that shakes out is going to be absolutely fascinating.
There's so many different things. I was speaking with someone this morning and they were asking me about my thoughts on the draft. And I said, really, you just don't know. Everyone wants to try and project and predict. But if one or two players or positions go way earlier than anyone else projected, then that means that everything else is going to be pushed back. There's that ripple effect. And so everyone knows, okay, there's going to be 3 quarterbacks probably taken in the top 5 picks, if not top 6. And so, but what if another quarterback goes in the top 10? Okay, now we're at 4. So this then makes more high quality players available. And by the way, do not put it past Omar Khan to say, I'm going to go up and get my guy.
Yeah.
It might be a wide receiver, but I'm going to go up and get my guy. And you know what? I've got that extra 3rd round pick. I'll go up in the 2nd round, or maybe he did it last year as a perfect example. He goes up and gets Broderick Jones. They have to give up some capital, but later in the draft, what do? They trade back. They get another pick. They turn those picks into Darnell Washington and Nick Herbig in rounds 3 and 4. He is willing and able to manipulate the board so that he keeps his draft capital and that he gets the players that he wants. So all I'm saying with that is buckle up, Steeler fans, because it's going to be a wild ride when that 3-day selection process begins.
And look what he's done at the quarterback position this offseason. Yep. And I look at it from the standpoint of last year with the draft, because that was Omar Khan's very first draft, and how he operated. I talk with my co-host Ike Taylor about this all the time, because he was in the room when all this went down as part of his scouting responsibilities with the Steelers. From the fan standpoint, Pittsburgh Steelers fans would have been cool if the team would have stayed at 17 and drafted Joey Porter Jr. and everyone would have been happy. They trade up to get Broderick Jones to address that need, and then they still get Joey Porter Jr. at pick 32. Yeah. So if he does the same thing or a similar thing with this draft, how that shakes out, they say con artist. I love saying the Wrath of Khan is someone who loves Star Trek. But it's just like, I cannot wait to see what he does at the end of this month with the draft for what the team needs and what the position areas that we know that the team has to address. I have the utmost confidence that he's going to be aggressive and make the team better one way or another. And I can't right now. I do think I would love to see Jackson Powers Johnson if he's the guy that they've identified, because again, going back to, okay, really since Pouncey retired, that's a position where you've had stud players in Steelers uniforms, but it didn't work out with Mason Cole this last year. I thought he was actually okay in 2022. And then Kendrick Green, again, they were asking him to do something that he's probably better suited being a guard at the NFL level. So that's an area where whoever the quarterback is, we want to have success, but getting that center position right, whether it's Wilson or Fields in 2024, is going to be of the utmost importance.
People ask me all the time, Jeff, what would be your perfect scenario? And that's if he doesn't, if Omar Khan and company don't want to trade up, is I identify a team like Buffalo at pick 28, who's probably like, we need a receiver. We need a receiver. Okay. You want to pick 20? We'll switch back to 28. And at 28, if you look at a center pick there, like it's not going to be that big of a deal. A lot of people might say 20 is a reach, but let's say they want someone that is still on the board. It's a tackle, maybe it's a wide receiver that they really covet, or even a corner that might have fallen down
Mhm.
at that position. And then in round 2, move up. So let's say like a Zach Frazier, who most people say is a day 2 pick. Okay, maybe you got to move up in round 2 to get him though. If you trade back with Buffalo, you might have more capital. You talk about the 6th round picks the Steelers have, the 3rd round picks that they have. They're going to be able to move and do some stuff, and that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I have one final question for you, and it's very broad, and that is: do you think the Steelers have done enough leading up to the NFL draft this offseason?
That's tough. That's tough. I'd like to see some more depth at other positions. I like the aggressiveness. No, but after the draft, I'd probably answer that differently, Jeff.
Yeah, no, you're probably right.
Because I think about it like Minka Fitzpatrick didn't have any turnovers this last season. How do you get to him being a ball hawk again? Where I would argue he was like the team's best offensive player as a defensive player, if that makes any sense at all.
It does.
So how do you get back to him doing what he does? Is it Dante Jackson? You're going to need another corner to get opposite Joey Porter Jr. How you address that? Who's the other safety? Who are the other linebackers to complement Patrick Queen? And then Dan Moore Jr. entering the final year of his deal, I'd imagine he's going to continue to, because his contract value is favorable. He's been an NFL starter, but then do you move Broderick Jones over to the left tackle position? And then again, you still have the center position. You need more receiver depth. So not yet, but I want to give Omar Khan and company the benefit of the doubt of what they do in the draft to address the remaining needs that this team has. And I'd probably answer that question differently. We can only predict so much and speculate so much when it comes to the draft, but I just wish there was more depth at areas of need with this team right now, because I like some of the talent on paper, but then it's like, oh, think about this, right? Like if Joey Porter Jr. goes down, like what are you doing at corner? Like Dante Jackson, I know Corey Trice will be back. He didn't play at all last year in what would have been his rookie year. But I'd like to see some more depth on this team where it's like, all right, ready to roll. Bring on week 1 of the 2024 season.
There's still talent out there in free agency, and a lot of those players, and rightfully so, are probably just biding their time and saying, we're going to wait till after the draft, and we're going to find a team that maybe wanted a safety and he didn't get a safety. So Justin Simmons is like, hey, I'm still here, and then they might find their home there. So
another guy too, and I don't think it would make sense because he's more of a ball hawk player, which is what the role Minka Fitzpatrick is, but Eddie Jackson's still a free agent too. Yeah. So it's like, the point is that there is other talent out there that you could bring in, and to see, could the Steelers bring in a player who's still a free agent even after the draft if they still have needs that they need to address? It'll happen with other teams. It'll happen too once we get into training camp, preseason too. We see every year guys go down with injuries. It's an unfortunate part of the game, but it's an inevitability. So,
last year, Quan Alexander was signed, I think, the day they reported to training camp. So he played meaningful snaps, made meaningful plays for the team before he ruptured his Achilles tendon. So yeah, you're right. There still can be moves to be made well after the NFL draft has concluded. So Mark, I thank you very much for your time. I want to give you an opportunity to plug what you're doing with Believe in Steelers and Ike Taylor, and any socials that you want to plug as well.
Jeff, thank you for having me. And the kids watch on YouTube. So if you type in Mark Bergen Steelers on YouTube, that's Bergin, you can find my show, the Believe in Steelers show, with 2-time Super Bowl champion Swaggin' You, Ike Taylor. It's awesome talking with him because he's a scout for the team. So he's having conversations regularly with Omar Khan, other scouts, people in the team's front office. So it's always fun to talk with him, where it's just like sometimes you have to read between the lines a little bit, because there's things that he can be very honest about. And then there's some things where it's like, hey, can't tip our hand of what exactly we're doing. But it's always fun chopping it up with him. And Jeff, we will need to get you on probably after the draft too, because there is a lot of time between now and training camp. And I'm sure there's going to be endless discussion about quarterback battle, Wilson versus Fields.
For sure.
And look too, one other thing too, I'll mention, Jeff, to kind of look ahead after the draft. Thing I'm looking at between now and May 2nd is the team picking up Najee Harris's 5th-year
That's a
deal.
good
So
point.
there's going to be a ton to talk about, even though we have a lot of time between now and September.
Ball and shorts, baby. Get ready. Buckle up. It's always fun. Mark, thank you for your time as always. Take it easy until we talk again. Be safe out there.
Jeff, you're the absolute best. Thank you. And hey, Oklahoma Joe's, go sponsor my guy. I love the
They
grilling
did.
segments, my man.
They kind of did. So yeah, man, I got a new smoker out of that deal.
Love it.
All
Love it.
right,
Thank
dude.
you again,
Thanks,
man.
Mark. Yep. See ya.